Hi, everybody. Welcome to this thing we're doing. I'm Travis McElroy, one of the creators and adapters of the Adventure Zone podcast and Adventure Zone graphic novels. With me is my father, who I would say takes the lead on those adaptations. Hello, Father.
I am the co-creator of the Adventure Zone graphic novels and of Travis.
That is true and weird. Joining us is Jordan and Sarah from the Bubble graphic novel and podcast as well. Where it's a theme we got going here. It's adapting a podcast into a graphic novel. You get it. Jordan, Sarah, introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Jordan Morris. I am one of the co-writers of the upcoming graphic novel Bubble.
I'm Sarah Morgan. I'm the other co-writer of the forthcoming graphic novel Bubble.
So we're talking today about adapting it, and we have some talking points. But the first thing I want to ask, because this is something we're running into over at Taz HQ, the time distance between when we made the podcast to now adapting it keeps growing. And there comes points where it's time to like write a scene or like see something play out in the pictures. And you're like, wait, when did that happen? Was that in the show? Is that something we did? And I find more and more that I can't remember the podcast. Is that right? Is that something you guys have run into?
We thought to record ours so we can listen to it back. that was a useful thing that we did. Like we made a recording of it that we could check in with.
It's just the fun life hack that we have.
I don't want to have to pay for it though. Like I think they exist somewhere, but I don't know how to get podcasts, and I assume I have to pay to hear them. Is that not?
Sound like your grandmother.
Yeah, just get a self-addressed stamped envelope and send it to Podcast HQ. No, I think there is so much more Taz than there is Bubble. Bubble is just 8 episodes at the moment. We had a very finite little chunk of story to futz with for our graphic novel. We certainly kind of like added stuff and fleshed out some characters and some scenes and added some new stuff. But as far as like the stuff we were adapting, it was pretty manageable. But I imagine there is many more hours of Taz to comb through when you're looking for your story.
Did you see that as a benefit or a challenge to, especially in the realm of fleshing out characters and expanding on that? Was that something you were excited about, or was it tougher than you thought it would be?
Yeah, I mean, I think, even though there's only 8 episodes of Bubble at the moment, it is still too much to put into one graphic novel. So we did have to, to kill some darlings, as they say in writerly circles.
Wait, what? You killed people? It's interesting to me because
I'm confessing to a murder.
I got him. I'm wearing a wire.
That's very hot on podcast, by the way.
Yeah.
The whole murder.
Get him. Yeah, if we can lock that down, that's great. Well,
podcasts love murder.
They love them. Even though like on paper we're both like taking podcasts and adapting them to graphic novels, there is like one aspect that's wildly different, which is Bubble was scripted, right? And Adventure Zone, we kind of make it up as we go. And so when we were adapting it, we had a lot of like kind of treating the podcast as a bit of like the writer's room pitches. And now we had this chance to say like, well, eventually we got to this point, so now we can go back and like set that up better and like work on that better. Were there things that you, having this chance to adapt it, said like, I think we can do that better or different, or was it more like, yep, that's the script and that's what we're doing?
No, we were pretty free. The script was always, Jordan created this amazing show with a really, but it was the world of it and the tone of it that we've definitely carried over. And the sort of canonical stuff, we're enjoying that being as loosey-goosey as we want it to be. And it's just always being about those characters, these, relatable 20-somethings in gig economy jobs trying to make stuff work. Is what we always spring back to. So no matter how crazy it gets, or whether this monster comes from here, or this character has merged with this character and stuff, we're just always coming back to the this gang of friends making it work.
I'm so excited to see it.
And killing
like,
monsters, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Because listening to the show,
and killing monsters.
As you do in
As
your
you do.
20s. Hey,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it's a
Bridge
maybe
wild.
those monsters, they might be emotional monsters, or they might be
Exactly.
physical monsters.
Sure.
Oh, wait, that's a metaphor. We should write that down.
Oh,
Metaphor.
I get it.
There's a metaphor.
But like, I can't wait to see it, because it even like listening to it, right? There's a visual element already to it, right? Because you have the descriptions, you have the well, why can't I think of stage, directions playing out, and
Yeah,
the action
so
stuff.
Yeah, so Bubble has a narrator that has a lot of jokes. Like the
Mhm.
narrator has kind of a personality and kind of a take on the action. And we thought about just doing that literally for the graphic novel, like, having a narrator chime in. But yeah, we kind of thought we wanted to challenge ourselves and do something that was a little more for comics. So we kind
Yeah.
of tried to take all that narrator stuff and and use it to help Tony draw the world.
Yeah.
And so I think it, obviously we don't have that little joke bucket of the narrator chiming in, but I think it led to a lot of like cool visual stuff that goes on and a lot of jokes on signs.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
think-
honestly, that was something we went through too, right, Dad, where we were talking about the role of Griffin.
Yeah,
as
what
the
how do we
DM.
use Griffin? The irony being that Griffin has the most screen time in the podcast,
Right.
as the DM, and I guess in a way the narrator. And so we really kind of, that was a big decision we had to make early on, and that was to still include Griffin as the DM,
but in a much more reduced way.
much
Like,
yeah.
I
because-
love
and it has become more reduced as the books have progressed, just because the interplay has evolved as well.
something I love about Taz. One of the Taz choices I love is that Griffin is in that little bubble and he is just wearing a normal button-up work
Yeah.
shirt. I think that is so funny. Every time I see it, I'm like, that's just a great decision.
I mean,
So,
it's
yeah, I think you guys have done a great job incorporating your narrator and making him a character with like a great perspective.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's we started working on the graphic novels like 36 years ago, so I can't remember, but I feel like discussion wise, it's inspired directly by like the Stanley pop-ins of like, hey, you may not remember, but
Excelsior!
wouldn't it be great if
See,
all the
Amazing
Stanley-
Spider-Man number 63,
Right.
true believers.
I think it should just be like, from now on, Marvel Comics, if you're listening, which I assume you are because you're trying to steal all of our comics ideas, you should continue the Stanley pop-ins, but he just pops in and says Excelsior, completely disrupts the flow of whatever's happening, make it in a really dramatic scene. It's like, oh no, the Captain America, he's bleeding. Excelsior. Okay. Okay, and then just keep going with the scene. That's from me to you. But yeah, we wanted to have that feeling of, I don't know, is that question of the meta commentary is the kind of thing that we went back and forth on, because so much of that in the show is the observation of. I think kind of the same thing with the narrator in Bubble, where the commentary of the narrator kind of like, it's kind of almost the voice of the like viewer watching the scene and being like, this guy's a real doofus or whatever, right? Like we are kind of getting that impression from the narrator.
At any point when you guys were planning out and thinking about what you wanted to do with Bubble, was it ever was it always going to be a straight adaptation of the 8 episodes, or had you thought about doing something in the Bubble universe that wasn't necessarily tied to that exact story?
Like Serenity, how that kept going,
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about it, and I think we wanted to strike a balance between showing people stuff they liked from the podcast, because as someone who listens to podcasts and then occasionally ingests the adaptations, you do want to see those characters and you want to see takes on them. But I think we also wanted to give people a certain amount of new stuff. We did have to change the story a little bit just for for page length.
Yeah.
So we kind of took that as an opportunity to kind of mash up stuff from the podcast, but also new stuff and new scenes. So, hopefully when you read it, if you're a fan of the podcast, you see all your old buddies and you see some cool moments from the podcast, but you think you're also getting enough new stuff to where
Right.
to where it feels cool to spend $20+ on something.
I don't want to hear from Jordan anymore. I want to ask this question directly to Sarah, because
Certainly.
this is a question that I don't need Jordan.
Women in comics.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I don't need Jordan. Was there ever any point, were there points where you're just like, this joke does not work in this format, right? In like, yeah.
A million times. Jordan and I are both TV comedy writers, and we work in sitcom and we work in sketch, and we are both great at doing kind of jokes by the yard. Like, we can come up with 400 hilarious pub signs or funny t-shirts or all that kind of stuff. And so often with the comics, we found breaking it down from sitcom episodes, which have a very particular shape and formula, to something that was like a really satisfying arc. That was like long, and there's moments in it where there are no jokes at all. Don't be scared, there's another joke coming around the corner, but we've got pages of just like beautiful feeling and emotion and these beautiful drawings that you can really pause for a breath. So actually so often we found, like, there's an expression, I've just made it up, and it's a picture paints 1,000 words.
Oh, I like that.
There were so many points where Tony would do a beautiful picture and we're like, we are not putting
up 1,000 words. Was that 1,000 words?
Oh, it might be a million now. I think that's more internet.
Okay.
Million is more internet,
with
right?
all of the high res stuff. So yeah, because that was something we ran into too, where there were jokes that we were like, well, this joke only works in audio. You can hear our delivery, you can hear the irony, you can hear the inflection, all that stuff. And then you have a really talented artist be like, oh, I got it. And you're like, oh, cool, great.
Yeah, and that's one of the beauties, is the fact that a lot of those times we'd say, well, no way this joke's going to work. And Carrie Peach, our incredible artist, would say, well, wait a minute, I might be able to do that, because you got body language, you got facial expressions, and you've got all these tricks of the trade. And, there were a lot of times where she saved jokes that we said, no way. Because
Sarah, I don't want to hear from my dad anymore either. Sarah, have you done comic work before, or is this your first kind of adaptation?
Oh, I've adapted the other way around. I've adapted graphic novels for the screen, which is a joy, because you're essentially just being handed a storyboard.
Right.
It's like the best. It's the best gig ever. This is my first time doing it the other way around, and oh man, it was just a joy, because the world already existed. I worked on the podcast, like bringing my like audio, British BBC audio knowledge to the podcast, and then to just be handed this sandpit of joy. Sandbox, that's what you guys say.
For some reason I knew exactly what you meant. I don't know why.
The sandbox of Bubble, and just all we had to do was just keep to the characters and keep to the tone, and then we could sort of off-road as much as we wanted to, and that was just a joy.
I want to ask Team Taz, in your new installment that you have coming up, is there a change from those podcast episodes that you particularly like? Is there a change where you're like, oh, I'm glad we got to do a new version of that?
Oh, a lot. I mean, with the stuff, let me think. There's a lot of stuff with why am I Lucas and Maureen, Lucas and his mother Maureen, that I feel like we really got to like pinpoint a lot more like clarity of emotion, clarity of like motivation.
The emotional stuff was really a very, very cool addition to the story, because their storyline packed a lot of feeling into the actual story. That was one of the things I found very gratifying about Crystal King.
And there's a lot of stuff in Crystal King. I mean, there's a lot of stuff throughout, right? Where when you're playing a D&D campaign, there are things that have to happen for it to be a D&D campaign. Like, hey, this episode, the story barely moves forward, but we have a wild fight with some extra large tardigrades. And in the graphic novel, we'd be like, no, we don't. Back to the story. And don't get me wrong, tardigrade fight is great. It just like on paper, it just seemed like a huge like we're going to take a detour here for, and I was like, okay, this doesn't make any sense.
Because
spend more time with characters.
In an episode of a podcast, as you know, you build to a climax and you the excite. Oh, but well, you're in the, you may be an eighth of a way into a graphic novel, and that climax is anticlimactic. You don't need it there. And so, yeah, we had to restructure. And the tardigrades is a great example because we really didn't want to lose the appearance of the tardigrades, but it made us figure out a way to include it in an abbreviated form, but still make an appearance and still
almost a cameo, if you will.
Almost a tardigrade cameo.
Well, and along those same lines, we also got to spend a little bit more time seeing like Taco and Kravitz interacting together, right? We got to spend, because sometimes it's where that, like we were talking about the writer's room nature of the podcast, where we get the like benefit of having finished and seeing where these story arcs go later, that we can be like, okay, great, now we get a chance to like kind of go back and polish it, knowing where it goes. So just a lot more I would say character moments and stuff like that. It was very, very nice.
We also got to get some cameos in as well, didn't we, Jordan? And from people who were in the podcast.
Am I in it? Do I make a cameo?
Form.
Maybe.
I noticed a new one today when I was reading it. Someone who was in the podcast who is just a nice background character, but very clearly they are who they are. And you can probably spend a whole day just like picking over backgrounds.
So Jordan, have you had all the McElroys on Bubble?
All the talented ones. So I think that's going to wrap it up for us. Jordan, if you want to take us out.
I'm not done with this line of questioning, Your Honor.
Well, you can talk to him off mic.
Listen, listen, there's so many great McElroys, and we hope to continue the Bubble world for years to come, and there will be many opportunities to fold in as many McElroys as possible.
That soothes my ego just fine.
Babies included.
Yeah. Dot has been asking about it. She says, Mama. She says shoes. She says dada, and she says, when am I going to get to be on Bubble?
That Mackle baby's going in.
Yeah.
Before we wrap things up today, our publisher wants us to remind you that all our books are on sale July 13th this summer. So don't forget to pre-order yourself our graphic novels, The Adventure Zone, The Crystal Kingdom, and Bubble from your local B&N store.
Yeah, do it. They're great. And you'll look cool walking around reading it, because it's not 1996 anymore. And comic books are cool now. And you can confidently read it by the sports field or down at the roller rink, or I don't know, wherever kids read graphic novels these days, at work in your cubicle when old man McGuthers isn't looking,
Maybe go to a secret warehouse party and read it. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.